What's up, you guys? Matt Jablonski here with the Point of Change Meets. Tonight, our guest is Jesse Crosson. Jesse Crosson fairly recently anyways, was released after 19 years in prison. He now works for prison reform and for re-entry programs. Took something that was a negative in his life and is using it to help others that find themselves in that same situation. And that's what we're all about here at the Point of Change. A couple announcements before we get started. Thank you to my newest supporter, Brandy Conklin. You're awesome. I really appreciate you. If anybody else wants to become a supporter, there should be a link in the bottom there somewhere down by the comments and stuff. Click that link and you can get signed up to be a supporter. We do a little behind the scenes stuff in there. We make decisions as to who our guests are going to be and who we're going to be donating to. Yeah, and you get a cool little supporter badge by your name in the comments. So that's cool. On Monday at 9 a.m., I will be over on Sealed Lips Destroy. If you guys don't follow Sealed Lips Destroy, make sure you get over there and follow Anna Tossel and her page. Monday morning, I will be over there sharing my story. And mark your calendars for March 5th at 7 p.m. We are hosting a live Narcan training right here on the Point of Change. A whole program about harm reduction, Narcan. We're going to talk about all that stuff. We're having to have a Q&A and everything. So hopefully you guys can come on by. Let me check some comments, see how you guys are doing. Danielle, what's going on? Maria, good to see you. Brian O'Brien, thank you for showing up, brother. Brandy Conklin's here. What's up, Brandy? You guys see that cool little supporter badge by her name? You know you want one. What's up, Mike? Good to see you, bud. Josh and Lori's here. Kimberly's here. Right on. Awesome. Thank you guys for joining us tonight. Make sure you share this video out. Like and love and share and comment, all that good stuff. I'm not going to waste any more time. I'm going to get our guest up here. Everybody throw up all the hearts you can find for our guest tonight, Jesse Crosson. What's going on, man?
How you doing? Since you were talking about harm reduction and Narcan, I decided to take my sweatshirt off and show the Beats Overdose shirt, which is a nonprofit run by a friend of mine named Morgan, who does overdose prevention at hip-hop shows because it's a huge overdose issue and there isn't a lot of awareness in certain communities. So she started this nonprofit to make sure that people have access to information and the resources they need to save lives.
That's awesome, man. I'm so glad you brought that up. Yeah, we are all about harm reduction, finding different pathways of recovery, finding what works for you, all kinds of stuff here, man. And I'm really thankful to have you on here tonight because I've been looking for people that have gone through something terrible and come out the other side better and help other people that are now in their same situation they were. And you're a great example of that. So thank you for coming on tonight, man.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah. So I see. So since the overdose stuff and everything, are you a recovering addict then?
I definitely have a history of substance abuse. And it's been, like you said, it's been this interesting journey of 12-step exploration and kind of personal soul searching and trying to figure out what works and what allows me to feel the most connected to myself and to my community and being able to be of service to others. So yeah, it's definitely a part of my process.
Excellent, man. So not exactly like a formal recovery, but I mean, 19 years in a cell, you probably stepped away from the drugs at that time, I imagine.
A little bit. Well, I mean, surprisingly, there are a wide variety of drugs available inside. Like I never shot heroin until I went to prison. And then it was at that low of feeling like I have nowhere to go. My life is over because I originally had a 32-year sentence and Virginia doesn't have parole. So the idea of getting out early seemed, unimaginable. So there were definitely times that I gave up and I really reached these lows and I wasn't above getting high or trying to drown my pain away.
Wow. So you were sentenced with 32 and sat 19.
Yeah. So at the age of 18, the day of sentencing, my guidelines were 8 to 13 years. There was a modification done to the sentencing guidelines. They became 10 to 16 years. And the judge sentenced me to 32 years. That was definitely one of those moments of just like kind of heart-wrenching, hopelessness.
Yeah. He hit you with the book, huh?
He did.
So to ask the super obvious question, what were you in for?
So I committed a robbery and an unrelated non-fatal shooting. So essentially strung out on drugs, ran out of money, couldn't get anybody to front us anymore, couldn't call in any more favors. So we went and committed a robbery, which was just supposed to be a break-in, but it turned out somebody was at the house to go get money for drugs. And then a shooting behind a complicated thing about somebody stealing a drug and selling it to a gun who sold it to my friend, who sold it to me, who then went and threatened his girlfriend. And basically me being with the wrong people and living the wrong life and feeling the need to kind of like live through my ego rather than finding a life that was a little bit more meaningful and causing a ridiculous amount of harm on the way here.
Amen to that, man. Well, I'm glad you found the reform that you needed in your life to step away from the lifestyle. I've definitely been involved with my fair share of shady crap, man. I was a 13-year meth addict, so I was down in the gutters and doing all the dirty stuff. So I'm glad that you made it out better than you were, though, man. That's awesome. Um, so was there a specific moment that you realized in there or during this that you needed to make a change in your life, that you wanted something to be different?
For me, there wasn't just one moment. There was a series of moments. It was, I usually talk about it as 2 steps forward and 1 step back, but eventually building to this pressure of not being able to live the way I was living anymore. So in the beginning, that was just the sheer shame of what I had done and the harm that I had caused, and having to call my parents or my friends to tell them, "Hey, I'm in jail awaiting trial for, possibly spending 5 years or 10 years." Or like when I was first arrested, I didn't know that the guys I shot had lived. I thought they had died. So I thought I was facing murder charges. I thought I was going to be gone for the rest of my life. I had taken someone's child away. Like, I was struggling with this all throughout. And then there would be moments of getting more comfortable, and kind of like we talk about an addiction, like we fail to meet our standards faster than we can lower them. And then eventually it gets to the point where it's like, hey, I can't do this anymore. I need to do something differently. And whether it was related directly to addiction or not, it was just trying to adjust piece by piece. But yeah, there were these definite moments. So there was a moment that I was arrested. There was a moment that my final appeal and then my final habeas was denied, because when the judge sentenced me to that 32 years, for example, my lawyer asked him, he said, well, how much time is that? Because he read off all the individual sentences. And the judge said, well, I don't know. I just told you. So the judge didn't even know how much time he had given me. And we thought that was grounds for an appeal. When the appellate court said basically, look, he can do whatever he wants. Like, we don't care how much time he gave you. That was this low, because I'd been promised again, like, oh, there's another chance, or this will be reviewed, or something will happen. And in a weird way, that low was a blessing, because as long as I was holding on to something in the future, I wasn't living in the present, and I wasn't making the best of the present. So I needed to just be knocked completely as low as I possibly could, have all hope taken away, and then be able to rebuild from there. And those were really the moments of just like, hey, this is as bad as it's going to get, because I'm going to stop digging. Like, I'm going to start building rather than digging, and I'm going to start doing things differently. And those moments were really what allowed me to be where I am today.
Yeah, that's awesome, man. That's awesome. Was there like, while you were inside, were you like helping other guys at all before you got out and like helping them stay motivated, things like that?
Yeah, I mean, again, it was that 2 steps forward, 1 step back. When I first went in, I was terrified. I was an 18-year-old kid. I didn't have a gun. I didn't know what to expect. So there was a lot of kind of following and following other people's leads and following examples that I really shouldn't have been following, that I didn't feel good about. But that was the culture. This is what you do when you're in jail or when you're in prison. But eventually it got to the point where, and this, you talk about a point of change. This was one for me. I remember I was in the yard at Buckingham. It was a new prison I had just gotten to. And there had been a gang issue, and these two guys were stomping on somebody's head just for like 5 minutes, just stomping on his head, trying to kill him. And that was as terrible as you could imagine. But then it was even more that, like, our role as the prisoners who weren't supposed to be noticing or weren't supposed to be drawing attention was to make like morbid jokes, and was to laugh off how, oh yeah, he probably had it coming. And that was so horrifying. Like, in a weird way, that was more horrifying than what I was seeing. And that was when it was like, I can't allow this place to shape me. Like, I cannot allow this place to determine who I am, because if I do, I'm not going to like who I'm going to be at the end of the day. But at that point, I had tutored a guy. Like, I remember this was at the first prison. I really wanted to learn how to box, because they had a boxing program. You could go and you had this competition, once a year or twice a year, and it would be on the prison TV, and you'd see who wins and who loses. And the way I did that was, he came up to me and asked me if I would teach him, basically help him get his GED. I said, yeah, you help me learn to box and I'll help you get your GED. And then I watched that. And one, I learned how to box, which was great. But two, I watched this guy go from struggling on a daily basis to the day he came back and picked me up like, I was a little kid, and swung me around because he got his GED, and watching his family come see him for the first time since he'd been locked up, and watching the joy and the change that was possible. And that was when I knew I wanted to tutor, and I wanted to mentor, and I wanted to work with other people.
That's awesome. It's crazy how when you're in your lowest moments, a lot of times that's where you find your passion.
100%.
Yeah. And I mean, it sucks that we had to go through so many lows, but
My only regret really is that, I caused so much harm, that I had to cause so much harm in this path, because the lows, as much as I hated them at the time, they really have taught me every valuable lesson I've had. Like, the lessons about resiliency and kindness and connection and meaning, like, all that came from the suffering. And I really think that that's the thing. When I look at people who are happy and who are successful, except for those few like unicorn people who haven't had any trauma and just like grew up in a healthy environment, everybody I know that meets those characteristics has gone through a tremendous amount of suffering, and it's just allowed them to turn into the person they are. It's been the kind of crucible, or it's been the growth process that's allowed them to become their best self.
yeah, it's almost like when you go that far into the bad, when you come back, it's like you get rocketed into the good.
Very much so. I mean, that's definitely been my experience. I'm here with you today when I was still supposed to be in prison until 2032 or 2030. So yeah.
Yeah, that's crazy. So what was that experience like, getting the early release, finding out that you're getting out? Like,
Yeah, well, it all started as, and this is a really good example of like a lesson that I learned was that I have to do the next right thing, not because I'm supposed to or not because somebody tells me to, because that's the way that if I live my life that way, I feel the happiest and most content. So back in 2019, I was working. I'd been part of a peer support program. I had done all this work about other people. But what I realized was I really wanted to get out of prison, and I had struggled with that for a long time because I felt like, well, if I want to get out of prison, that means I'm not accepting responsibility or I'm justifying what I've done or anything. And then finally, somebody basically sat me down and was like, Jesse, like, you got double the high point of the guidelines. Like, even if anything else was supposed to be there, like, if you had gotten the high point of the guidelines, you would be out of prison right now. And for whatever reason, that clicked and made me feel like I had permission to say, hey, I want to go home. So in 2019, I filled out a petition for clemency, which at that time, the governor might grant 4 of those at the end of his term for political reasons or for donors, cousins, or just, some ridiculous low chance of it happening. But I did it because I wanted to know that I'd done everything possible to try to get out of prison. Essentially say, hey, I can do this, but I have to let go of the results because I'm not in charge. But this weird thing happened. Like all of a sudden I'm getting contact from a local reporter who wants to interview me for a story for the local news because she was highlighting the fact that Virginia doesn't have parole. And what does that mean? What is the good and the bad? And so she wanted to interview me. And then all of a sudden I have people like contacting me from the community, and I would send out essays that I'd written and have them posted on Facebook. And I was like getting letters and getting messages from people saying, oh, this is so inspiring. And it blew into something that I couldn't have imagined. All of a sudden I have this incredible community support. I have hundreds of letters. I have something that's starting to look like it could really be a possibility. And all that culminated in August of 2021 with them calling me in the office in the middle of the day and saying, hey, Mr. Crosson, you're going home today. Like, you've been granted a pardon. So in the middle of my day, having gone to work and having like done burpees and trying to get on the phone to call somebody, they're telling me I'm going home. Like, I woke up that day with 10 years left. There was no conceivable way I'd be leaving. And all of a sudden I'm walking out the gate an hour and a half later and I'm giving my mom a hug because I haven't seen her because COVID and visits and like, it was the most mind-blowing thing I can imagine.
Wow. I can't even imagine that. Just like, and that out of the blue too. Like, there was no like, hey, this Sunday is going to be the day or whatever. Just bam, here you go. You're out. What was that transition like? Did you face any kind of like institutionalization going on in your head?
Oh, 100%. I was really, or I like to think that I was self-aware about what I was dealing with and what I would face. So I was in therapy for all those years. I was involved with programs. I was involved in, helping other people. I was constantly working on myself. I had a serious program of meditation. I had all these things that I thought would prepare me. Like, I was reading parenting books in case I decided to be a parent one day. Like, I was trying to put everything in place, but I was still wholly unprepared because an hour or 2 hours after I get out of prison, I'm walking into a Costco, and 5 minutes later, I'm like basically in the fetal position, like having a panic attack because I can't handle the people and the space and the choices and the things. And that was when I realized I was not prepared, and I had no idea how to be prepared. And really, I think that nobody can. Like, there is no actual process of preparation unless we have, and this is one of the things I had to Quit Corps, a gradual reentry process where we actually slowly introduce people into society rather than just kicking them out the door one day. But that being said, I did everything I could, but I still struggle with things, and I still have adjustments that I need to make on a regular basis.
Yeah. How long have you been out now?
So I got out in August of last year. So it's almost a year and a half.
Wow. Yeah. So that's pretty fresh. That's pretty fresh. And so you're still facing kind of like some of that stuff still comes back. Is there anything that you would say that you like in a weird way miss about being in prison?
Sure. I think the two things I usually say are the camaraderie that I felt with guys, because it's something about a common purpose and a common identity, and kind of like not a common enemy, because I don't think that the staff is the enemy, but a common struggle. There's something about that brought us together in ways that I'd never experienced before, and I haven't experienced since. And then the second thing is the time to read or to meditate or to exercise or to do these things that I don't have out here in the world. I was talking to a friend earlier tonight about how every time I sit down and read one of the 27 books that are on my shelf, I love it and I feel fulfilled and I feel like my cup is full, but then I forget to do it, or I get caught up in doing this, or it's the middle of the night and I'm doing something else. And I recognize that I don't have that time to fill like I did in prison, and I miss that sometimes.
Yeah, I can totally understand that for sure. And I can't even imagine, like, because you've only been out a year and a half and you've already got a fairly good social media following on TikTok and Facebook and stuff like that. What has that adjustment been like? Were there smartphones in prison that you had use of, or?
There were smartphones in prison. I'll say that. They were definitely not allowed, and they were definitely not, supposed to be there, but they were there. But the biggest thing that kind of introduced that technology to us was back in 2014 or 2015, they brought in JPay tablets, which are basically decommissioned cell phones. So you learned like the Android operating system, you learned how to interact, you learned how to use the touchscreen because none of that existed before I went in. We had the Nokia block phone with the snake game and like actual buttons you pressed, and that was it. So being introduced to that technology was helpful, but I didn't know what TikTok, like literally the day I got out, the only thing I'd heard was that TikTok was somewhere where teenagers put dance videos. So the idea that I would actually have an account or post videos regularly on TikTok seemed insane. But I was really lucky because my then girlfriend had a really good friend who's in marketing. And she said, Jesse, like people are going to want to hear your story. And my girlfriend said this too, you should try TikTok. Like it's the best place to grow an audience. So I was like, all right, whatever. And I had always said when I got out that I wanted to go to this mountain. There's this hike that's just really beautiful. And it's these boulders that were pushed up by the glaciers, however many, thousands of years ago. And it's one of those views that kind of like takes your breath away. And so I was like, that's where I'll go. And I'll be able to let all this stuff from prison done because I knew that I'm somewhat institutionalized, that I carried a lot of trauma, that I had a lot of things with me. So like if I could go up there and I could just sit in nature and I could scream or cry or whatever I had to do, maybe then I could move forward and kind of be free. And that's what I did a video about. I did it sitting on the rocks on the top of the world. And it took off. And all of a sudden I had people commenting, asking questions and following. And it just kind of exploded from there.
That's awesome, man. And it's what an awesome success case. I mean, there's a lot of people out there that try to do what you're doing and they're, they strike out day after day, and you kind of made a post just a little bit ago about it, about the seeds that we plant that we really hope that it'll take, and we hope for a good crop on it, but sometimes it just does, like you said, it takes off like that bamboo plant, and other times you're just tilling the ground. So what would be your advice to somebody out there who's been on the grind and just not seeing that success yet?
I think that's the hardest question is, how long do we keep going and when do we readjust? I think for me, it goes back to the advice that I got. I had a meditation teacher who was also a psychotherapist who really helped me because one of the things he talked about was doing everything that's consistent with our values and our keystones. So he said, it's not so much important what you do on the outside. It's important what you do on the inside. So is every decision, every relationship, every work decision, is everything you're doing consistent with your values? Because if it is, it doesn't matter if you make $1,000 or $10,000 or $1 million, you're going to be happy because you're living your best life. So I think that a lot of times we do things for external motivation. We want to have money, or we want to have fame, or we want to have a pretty girlfriend, or we want to have something. Whereas when we do something from that internal place, one, we're more at peace and we're more satisfied. And two, what I found is that I'm a lot more successful. When I do things for external validation or external reasons, it just doesn't necessarily work out. Sometimes it does, sometimes it doesn't. But every time I've done something from a core place or a core thing that I value, I found success in it in some form or another.
Yeah, amen to that for sure. I've found the same thing with the point of change. I mean, it has been a very slow, gradual walk over here with the point of change. And but I'm so happy with the slow, gradual walk. Like for me, coming into recovery, I like to take things slow. When it gets too hot, too fast, I run away. That's just kind of my fight or flight jumps in and flight takes over. I'm gone, So for me, it's been an awesome slow burn to just crawl up here. But I love seeing messages like yours that just are so accepted, and you got such really good followers that have really good questions for you. And it's amazing to see the community that you've built.
Yeah, it's been amazing to be a part of it because, I didn't think anybody would care about my story. And ultimately, I don't think it's my story that people care about. I think it's the idea of redemption in themselves or the idea of a path forward when they feel like they're hopeless. But the connections that I've been able to make through this, both from friends, like I have a friend I have a video call with every week who's in Lebanon for the next month. And then he's going back to Ireland. And I never met this person. I've still never met this person. But at the same time, there are people who've been victims of crimes who reach out and say, hey, the person who hurt me never apologized or never was accountable or never changed. Like you give me hope that they'll change. Or it's someone who's been incarcerated who said, man, I don't know what to do. Part of me wants to go back because it's so much easier. Or somebody who has a family member who's locked up and said, hey, you give me hope that things will be okay. Or law enforcement or people from the military getting out and strike. It's been amazing the number of connections and just the kind of scope of connections that have made possible and how meaningful that is, because I wouldn't keep doing this just for like likes or for whatever. It's the connections and it's those messages and it's those DMs that I get at 2 a.m. about somebody be like, I've really been struggling, but I saw your video and all of a sudden, like, I feel like it's going to be okay. There's nothing in the world like that feeling, because that's the same feeling as this guy getting his GED after struggling for years. It's a feeling that I've done something of value, or I've contributed something of value to another person's life. And that's what life is all about.
For sure. For sure. I can definitely appreciate that, man. And I'm glad that, I can totally identify with what you're saying there too, because there's so many times that people like, it seems like the first thing everybody says when they message me is, I'm sorry to bug you, or I don't mean to bother you, or I know you're busy, and I always tell them, like, don't even worry about that. Like, you are not a bother. Like, I might be in the middle of something, but like, dude, I'm so happy to answer my messages and see that I can help somebody in some way with what I went through, because in a way it gives me closure on all of it. It's like there was a purpose for that 13 years of bullshit that I went through, and it wasn't just all suffering. So yeah, I totally agree with that. Do you have a message that you would give to somebody if someone were facing a prison sentence? What is your advice to them?
I think it would be threefold. The first is that you have to decide what you want to do with your time. Because if you go in kind of like this empty idea and you're going to let people shape you and you're going to go do what other people think you're supposed to do, you're probably going to end up worse than you are better. And I think that that's one of the really dangerous things. But what we have is a huge opportunity, because it's a question of, am I going to see this as a punishment? Am I going to sit here and feel sorry for myself and begrudge the day and moan about how bad things are? Or am I going to see it as an opportunity? Am I going to use this time as a mental, physical, spiritual boot camp? Am I going to meditate and read and write letters and study and do everything that I possibly can with that time? The second thing is, it's really a question of a kind of an extension of that. Like, what do you want to end up with on the other side of this? Like, what is your goal? Because in every situation in life, we have that choice of, what do we want to do with ourselves? Where do we want to end up? And I think a lot of time we walk through life kind of aimless, or kind of like just waiting to see what comes along. And I'm all for openness and present-mindedness. But if we don't have a goal, if we don't have an idea in the future, well, who knows where we're going to end up, and who knows what path we're going to end up taking. So I think it helps to have at least a general direction that we want to go. And the third thing is just the message that, for me, there have been times in my life where I wanted to give up, that I've wanted to take my own life, that I haven't wanted to do anything the next day. I haven't felt like it was possible. And yet through everything and through continuing to get up and putting one foot in front of the other, I've ended up in the position that I'm in today, which is far better and more privileged and just more amazing than I ever could have imagined. So sometimes it's our darkest day that, like I said before, really teaches us a lesson to live our best life.
Right on. Right on. And what is one thing that you've really noticed, like one, either with reentry or with prison reform? What's one big thing that you think, like, we really need to change this?
There are a number of big things. The first thing I would say is the attitude of rehabilitation versus punishment. Because if you take a kid and you stick him in a corner and tell him he's been bad, but you don't tell him why he's been bad, or you don't give him the skills he needs to make different decisions, he's probably not going to make different decisions. He's just going to be mad and do these things angry, or he's going to be sneaky about what he does because he hasn't actually learned anything. And that's essentially the idea of punishment. Like, we stick him in there because we assume it's somehow going to make them better. The second is, out of everyone that I saw in prison, maybe 5% of people weren't profoundly affected by trauma, whether that was growing up in poverty or physical or sexual or psychological abuse. Or substance abuse. I mean, these are issues of trauma that are not being addressed because we don't validate trauma. We essentially say, oh, you just need to make different decisions. You just need to think differently. It's like, that's not how trauma works. That's not how emotional damage and struggle and mental health and addiction work. We need tools. And again, we need to get to the root of that. And the third thing is what I mentioned before, the big issue of reentry, because we take people from a 23-1 major institution and say, hey, you're too dangerous to have at a lower level, or you're too dangerous to have at a work center. And then the next day we just let them out in the world like, hey, good luck. Like, we'll see you soon. Mm-hmm. And we have no gradual transition. We have no reentry support. We almost no resources. It's not about saying, oh, we need to spend more taxpayer money. It's like, hey, we should spend less taxpayer money, because that person should be working from a medium to a minimum to a work center to a halfway house before they ever get out. And each of those options is less costly going down. But again, I don't know how to describe it other than to think it's like, we're going to look back in 50 years at the way we run the prison system now and be as horrified as the idea of like medieval torture devices and be like, God, why would anybody ever think that was okay? Because if you look at it from the outside, it just doesn't make any sense.
Yeah, I love that point right there, because I mean, it has, if you look at the history of punishment and crime and everything else, like the stuff they used to do was barbaric. And I mean, that's even where we get the word institution from, what's the word that I'm thinking of? penitentiary, that a man would become penitent if he was put into a small cage by himself and left alone in the dark, that he would become penitent to look inside himself and fix the things that were wrong inside. And in a way, we still have that at the core of our incarcerations. My longest time in a jail cell, thank God, was 97 days. But that was the 97 days that really woke me up. And if it weren't for the jail that I was in had an NA program in there, and I didn't stick with NA after I got out, but it was really what planted some seeds and really what started the root process right there. And I mean, if they hadn't had that class there, there's like 100% chance that I would have just sat in a cell for 90 days and then went back to what I was doing. But it took people in there that had been where I was saying that they made it out, is what ultimately what made me change my mind and live the life that I'm living today. So I fully support everything you just said with, having programs available while they're incarcerated, re-entry programs. Like, I can't even imagine like what you went through there, 19 years in there. And then it's just, all right, you're out the door, what's one thing that you really love about the world now compared to either the world before or even prison? But
oh God,
that's a hard one.
I don't know honestly whether the world is any different. I think I just have a greater appreciation for it. I think that an experience of scarcity, of lack, really allows me to appreciate things that I never did before. Like, I never before, thought it was a big deal to be able to walk out the front door and go for a walk or go sit on the grass or go sit by a lake or go. Now, every one of those things, like almost every morning that I walk out the front door and then I feel the cold air, I just smile. It's just like, it's not conscious, it's not intentional. There's just a sense of freedom that comes from that I hope I never lose. And I know it's really easy to fall into patterns, but I think that there's a gratitude that has come from my experience that is kind of the foundation of why I feel so good on most days. Because even when I'm struggling, there's that moment in the morning when I walk out and I have a smile on my face, or that's moment of connection when I walk by somebody on the street and they smile, or when I sit down at the co-working space and I'm sitting next to somebody, we say hi, and I feel that little like butterfly in my chest, because I love to be able to interact with people and interact with people in a very wholesome kind of innocent way that isn't based on the like camaraderie of what feels almost like a wartime situation.
Yeah, I could definitely relate to that one. I never went to war, but I was in the Army when I was younger, and I've always had a very similar comparison to my jail time and my military time. It's very much, there's like the brotherhood, the camaraderie you talked about is involved with it, and you are really going through crap together, and you're all in that same struggle like you had said before. So there's a lot of similarities there. Let me see if anybody had any questions over here on the side. Dana says, do you need to be certified to go speak at a jail or prison? And how do you start a reentry program for people getting released?
I love that question. So one of the things you talked about people with lived experience in NA, people who have been where you've been. And that's one of the big things that I'm a fan of. And that's why we started a peer support program while I was inside. And that's one of the reasons that I started a nonprofit to do prison reentry getting out. So as far as certification, no, you don't need to be certified. Generally, you need to have something that you're willing to teach, or you're authorized to teach, or you're qualified to teach, I guess you could say. Like, I do a lot of work with the juvenile facility, and we're going through that process. And one of the things I'm so grateful for is that they're willing to have somebody with lived experience come in. Like, I get to go in and talk to the kids because I have the experience of saying, hey, I've literally been where you've been, and I'm telling you, you don't want to go where you're going. Like, let's make a difference. And I think that makes a huge difference. But like, for example, our local facility, they just want some kind of outline of what you're going to teach. So whether you're going to come in and teach yoga, you're going to teach job skills, you're going to lead a religious program, whatever it is, as long as you have something you can kind of quantify and you can show that you're going to teach, they're more than happy to have you. Now, that may not be true everywhere. Every institution, every system, every state is probably going to be different. But you don't necessarily need to be qualified or licensed to go into one of the facilities. As far as reentry programs, I look at it as Maslow's hierarchy. So at the base level, we have our most base needs. Like, we need housing, we need employment, we need food, we need, basic things. But from there, we need trauma-informed care. We need healthy community. And one of the biggest things that I see is that people get out of prison, go right back to the community that they came from. And they go back to the same trauma and the same struggle and the same kind of maladaptive patterns that led them to prison in the first place. So one of the big things that I think of is relocating people into a different community, or if nothing else, the idea of differential association. Introducing people to new communities, introducing people to new ideas. Like at the reentry class last night, I asked everybody in the room and I said, hey, does anyone in here know anyone who works remotely? Because we were talking about careers. And one guy raised his hand and said, yeah, I know one person who like does insurance remotely. And that's it. So as we talk about something conceptual, like even the idea of remote work was foreign, or that was what other people in other communities or other places do, to everybody in that room except for one guy. And to him, it even seemed like an outlier. So when we can introduce people to others who have different perspectives or different opportunities or different ideas or investments or careers, we expand their perspective, because that failure of imagination is often one of the most limiting and damaging things for somebody getting out of incarceration.
Yeah, it's not so much about having a plan as it is about having options, because you never know what's going to happen. Amen. Well, that covers my card I got here for you, man. I want to thank you again for coming on here and sharing your experience and strength and hope with us, man. It's really awesome getting to know you. I got a little fanboy syndrome over here because I watch you on Reels and on TikTok, so it's pretty cool to get here and just actually have a conversation with you. And I answered a lot of every question that I've had while I'm following you. So thank you for your time, man, and I hope you have a good night. You got anything else you want to say to these people before we get out of here?
Just thank you for having me, and to everybody out there, hope you're living your best life, and whatever's in the way you live in your best life, like, let's figure out how to address that and heal that and move forward, because there's no reason to be miserable today, man. The world is too full of opportunity.
Amen. Thanks, Jesse. I'm going to get you out of here. Have a good night, brother. Well, there you have it, guys. The Pointer Change meets Jesse Crosson. What an awesome guy. I really appreciate him taking the time to get on here. Obviously, we had a little mix-up on Sunday there, so got him rescheduled during the week here. This Sunday, we don't have a guest. Monday morning at 9 a.m., I will be over on Sealed Lips Destroy. If you guys want to hear my story of addiction and recovery, I'll be hanging out with Anna for the morning. One thing I want to add to everything we talked about tonight. Earlier in the interview, we talked about how sometimes you start a movement like this, you advocate for something, and for some people like Jesse, it really takes off and it booms, and it's like, holy crap, man, like he just blew up on TikTok and has, a huge following already. And others, we grind for years and go, push through a lot of little struggles and overcome a lot of little mountains, and we grind, and we don't seem to have those kind of results. On one hand, I want to tell you if that's you, which I would even say that I fall in that category of grinding for a long time with, a slow build of followers. I've been doing this. We're coming up on 5 years of the Point of Change, and I'm just now coming up on 16,000 followers. So, it's been a slow burn, but for me, I've been so appreciative of that slow burn and that slow build to this career. Because for one, and probably the biggest reason why I've loved it, is because it gives this opportunity right here for a small classroom setting. Like, we got 13 people here. The comments are easy. It's easy for me to read every single one of these comments, and for me to know quite a few of your names, and for me to actually keep up with you guys, and for us to have a good interaction. And it's not just a bunch of spammers and fake accounts and weird replies and people telling me my eyes are pretty in the comments. You know what I'm saying? So for one, if that's you, if you fall into that, it's been a slow rise kind of thing. Your career, whatever it is that you're building, is kind of slowly taking off. Appreciate where you are and just enjoy this slow ride. Don't get so caught up in trying to make this, and trying to make it everything right now. You'll get there. You'll get there. Just keep grinding and keep pushing forward. And how we said that it was like planting seeds, and then, sometimes it's like this amazing bamboo plant. What I would add to that is the story of the Chinese bamboo plant. The Chinese bamboo plant takes 5 years to grow above the ground. You plant a seed, and for 5 years, you have to water it. You have to make sure it's in the right place to get sunlight. You have to take care of this seed without seeing anything above the ground for the first 5 years. But once it blooms and hits above the ground, within 5 weeks, it shoots up to over 90 feet tall. So if you're in that spot of like, it's taken years and you're not seeing the results you want, and other people might even be laughing at you, and telling you how, oh, that's not going to work out, man. You should find a different job, or you should find a different career, or you should change whatever. They don't know that you're watering that seed. They don't know that that seed is right there. And one of these days, that seed is going to reach the top and it's going to shoot up, man. And then everybody's going to be coming knocking at your door, telling you how awesome that thing is and so proud of you. And those doubters are going to be coming up to you. And we knew you could do it the whole time, man. Hey, can I have a job? So never mind the doubters. Don't even mind your own doubt, man. Just keep pushing forward, keep grinding, keep going, and you will get there one day. You know, just don't worry so much about reacting to the winds and the waves, and just follow your heading and you will make it to your destination. Thank you guys so much for being here. Give some shout outs. Oh, the love of my life, Caitlin Patricia Tanner. We're going to have to change that last name pretty soon. Angie, what's up? Good to see you. Brandy, love you, Maddie. Thank you for so much for sharing. Oh, it's good to have you here, Brandy. Thanks for being here. Angie, I love and appreciate you, Maddie, and the Point of Change family. We love and appreciate you, Angie. Kimberly, thanks so much. Great interview. Wasn't that awesome? That was so cool. I've followed that guy for a while now, not for a super long time or anything, but I've followed him for a little while. So it was really cool to have him up here and actually be able to talk to him. And I love the opportunities that I have, that I've developed in this career that I'm following, the opportunity to meet a lot of those people. Like when I see a video on Facebook of somebody that I find really interesting or inspiring or whatever, I actually have the opportunity to reach out to them. And it's a good possibility that I will get to talk to that person, you know. Like, I mean, anybody can message them, but I mean, to actually get in, you know, I don't know, not trying to toot my own horn, but ooga, so happy that I am where I'm at in my life. Josh and Lori, good to have you here. Dana, he was amazing. Thank you, Maddie. Isn't he awesome? Very well spoken. He talks really fast, though. That was one thing. Like, I thought he's always talking fast in his reel videos, but I figured that was because you only have a minute and he's got a lot of information to get out. But he talks really fast. It was kind of hard to keep up with sometimes, but I did it. I did a good job. Let's see. Janet Jones, thank you for being here. Tanya Brown, good to see you. Pam Velesner, what's up, Pam? Right on, you guys. Thanks for being here. I appreciate everybody being here. Make sure you hit some hearts on this video, some likes, some loves, some laughs, some cares, all that good stuff. Share it out if you didn't. And I will see you guys tomorrow right here on The Point of Change. Remember, Monday morning, I'm on Sealed Lips Destroy. And March 5th, we're having a Narcan training right here on The Point of Change. I'll see you guys tomorrow. Until then, stay happy, stay healthy, and stay clean.